do not do what I did and go for a chocolate digestive whilst you've still got a little bit on your finger. You can tell we're a little bit closer to finishing because we're painting today. Stick around and I'll show you how and what I'm using. Like a lot of this project, I've researched and researched when it came to every material I'm using, and the paint is no different. I've actually bought 2 whole systems of paint. I changed my mind after I'd already ordered the first lot. So what I've gone with is a very traditional linseed oil based paint, and it's pretty much what would have been used here originally, and there's a load of benefits with it, and I'll explain them in the workshop later and also compare it to the other products which I had bought. Now the majority of the joinery I did 2 coats on, the primer coat and the first coat down in the workshop, so it can just have its final coat now, and then the barge boards need 2 full coats. Any other time I'd be decanting this into a smaller tub, but I'm only going to be using this for joinery up on the roof. So I'm going straight into the tin with my big brush and my small brush, and I'm not too worried about it because at the best of time you're going to be about 6 meters away from it, so we've got a little bit of leeway as far as the finish goes. Right, I'm going to start down this end, we'll work along. I'm basically doing the back of the house because I'm not going to be working on it for the next few days, so if anything does get kicked up or any dust or dirt, I'm not going to foul the paint because it does take a couple of days to dry, especially this time of year. Well, that's the back. Oh, you didn't. I was not expecting midgies this time of year. So that's the back of the house done and the end gable. So let's head down to the workshop and we'll take a look at it in more detail. But this is how it all started. I went online and I bought what I considered or found to be the best external wood paint I could find. It could be mixed to the colour I wanted and it had good reviews. It's called Saddle-In Super Deck and it's a satin finish. I had it mixed to the rail number I'm using, which is 7044, which is silk grey, I think it's called. And this stuff was mixed up. A day or two later it came. This was over £100 or somewhere near £100. I was assured that it was the right route to go. Used it on the oak door I hung in the workshop. Went down okay, and it was nice to use. Then I had a change of heart. And the more I got into the roof, the more I was going for belts and braces, long-lasting, traditional where possible. And I started to think, well, what helped the woodwork last so long the first time round? Because remember, we were pulling 120-year-old timber off there, which was absolutely solid. The paint was decent on it, and in areas where water had gathered in big amounts, there was rot. But in the main bulk of it, it was good. It was all fine. Now, number one was decent quality timber, and we established that in the last video. I just found the best quality redwood I can, really tight grained, really decent stuff, and that's what I went with. That's what was on there before. No need for hardwoods, engineered woods, anything like that. But the wood is only really as good as your paint finish. So I started looking into it and I found this stuff. Now, I thought £100 for a pot of paint was fairly pricey. Then I bought what I imagine is half the size, yeah, and I think it was more expensive. So my first worry was I'm just paying for a artisan name or something like that, like certain other paint companies. But it turned out that this stuff goes a very long way, and actually I doubt that I've spent much more per square metre than I would have if I'd used that other stuff. This is pretty magical stuff, and I'll tell you why. First up, we got this paint. Like I said, it went on fine, but all these modern paints do is create a really decent quality film over your wood. And yes, it adheres to the wood, but it just creates a nice layer over the top. The problem with it is if you've got any bubbling or peeling, or maybe where a bit of wood glue was where it hasn't stuck as well, and then the moisture gets in behind. We're up on a roof line 10 meters high, driving rain. If that water gets in, it just sits behind the layer. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, surely there's a better route to go. And that's how I started researching the lead-based paints that were on there originally, which lasted so well, and why did they last so well, and what was the equivalent nowadays. Which I think I'm correct in thinking is this. Oil-based paints back in the day were linseed oil. They weren't kind of using petrochemicals or anything like that. It was just linseed oil. We call them lead-based paints because they had a lead part to them, and that's mainly, I think it was more fungicidal or colour or something like that. This paint it's replaced with titanium or zinc, or I can't remember. I'll stick it here when I remember. But basically, it's essentially the same paint that was put on there 120 years ago. There's a little bit more to this than just taking it straight out of the tin. So let me give you my little chemistry lesson. So for your first coat, you need to actually thin it down. And rather than just thinning it down with spirits or water, you need to take 50% of the linseed paint, and then you mix it with 35% of the linseed oil, just raw linseed oil from the same place, and then the remaining 15% with turpentine. And then you put that on, and you can see that it's just soaking in. It's completely different from using a normal modern paint where you're just putting on a nice coat and it's creating that film. It's really soaking into the wood. So like some finishes for worktops, and you see me using Osmo and things like that, they're a bit more like that. You know, they've got an oil element to them, so they're kind of sinking into the wood grain. And that's all you do for the first coat. After that, you can just go in straight from the tin. Now, I've been using the paint for a couple of weeks now, so there's a few pointers I can share. Now, one of the interesting things with the linseed oil paint is that it needs UV light to cure properly. Now, that's something I thought was going to be a hindrance because I was doing a lot of it in the workshop, but it still dried after 2 or 3 days. It was still handleable. But that said, the stuff I painted outside at the weekend that you saw me doing a couple of days ago is already touch dry now, even though it's colder, it's been exposed to the elements, but it has had the UV light. So there is something in that, and time of year is going to play a big part there. Interestingly then, for as far as maintenance goes, I'm sure you can put another coat on in 10 years time, but they do say you can just literally go straight over the top with the linseed oil, and it perhaps just penetrates in and gives, freshens it up. Another little fact, which you'll all know and I really didn't, is turpentine, terps, is not just like white spirit. It's distilled pine resin. You know when you're cutting through wood and you hit a knot and you get that sort of really nice piney smell? It's like a really, really strong version of that. Or a bit like when you're mulching the garden with bark. Anyway, it's quite a forest smell, but do not do what I did and go for a chocolate digestive whilst you've still got a little bit on your finger, because you'll be tasting it for hours. Distilled pine resin and a bit of raw linseed oil. It's all quite primitive, but it works, and we know it works because it's the same stuff essentially that was up there beforehand. Now I feel like I'm just trying to sell this to myself because I've just used it all over the roof, and I'm really really want it to work, and I think it is going to. And it also sticks to pretty much anything. Yes, most of it was bare wood that I went onto. The purlins had some paint on where I had to do some repairs, and other bits had the old paint on. Just gave it a good rub down, and this really took to it. I think always it's going to be better going onto bare wood with that proper build up of primer. But it will take to metal. So the cast iron stack, straight on with this. Again, just like the lead-based paint that probably was there beforehand. That is actually going to come off. I'm going to try and take it back to the bare metal without sanding. I'm going to use a needle scaler. Probably going to be a deafening few hours of my life. But this should get everything off in flakes and chips rather than horrible airborne nastiness that we don't want to breathe in. And that will take me back to bare metal, and then I can prime it before going on with the paint. But we'll do that in a different video because that might not even work. And the reason for doing that is because I can't take down 30 foot of soil pipe and take it to get sandblasted. So we'll do it in situ. I'm sure there is no problem with using this, and especially if it's in a sensible place that you can get to keep on top of it. I think this will be just fine, and I'm going to be using this because obviously it's colour matched, but it's going to be used on lower level. I've got other bits of joinery, some of the doors, some of the cladding around the porch, and it will all tie in. It's going to have the same sort of finish to it. We'll just know, well, only you and I will know the difference. So I guess the question is, why am I shrugging off modern paint engineering and the latest paint technology and going with something which is essentially unchanged for hundreds of years? Am I missing out by not going with this, or am I playing it safe by going it this way? I'm not too worried at all. I mean, the thing is, with anything, you get new stuff come out in building technologies, and I mean building materials, everything comes out, and really people start using that without it being trialed and tested for long at all. I mean, you can get lab tests and things like that, but really a lot of stuff people just jump straight on without kind of contemplating how long it's going to last. And I think wood finishes might be one of those. And the main reason, which I've completely neglected to mention for going for this paint, is that it looks after wood in the same way that lime renders and lime plasters look after your brick and stone. This is a breathable type of paint, so if moisture gets into that wood in any way, whether it's driven in from behind the wood or anything like that, it can wick back out through the paint, because I think it's down to the surface tension of the oil or something along those lines. But basically, rot is almost, it's not impossible, but it's far less likely to happen than if it's just trapped behind what is essentially cling filmed wood when you put a solid layer of paint over it. The tin has also reminded me that you should always throw away your rags or your paintbrushes if you've kind of wiped anything, because they can self-combust. We don't want that. I'll put the links to all the stuff I'm using on the roof, as well as any of this and the information down in the description below. Also, if you want to pick up a t-shirt or a mug or all that good stuff, I'll put that down there. You can click on one of those, head over, and it's a good way to support the channel. We've also got some goodies coming out in the next few weeks if we find time to make them. But that'll be a reveal for the future. But thank you for watching. Remember, if you can, do it yourself, and we'll see you next time.